Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. This is Morten from INKISH. Today I am very honored and very pleased to have my friend Ford Bowers from Printing United Alliance as my guest here on this show. So welcome on INKISH, Ford.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Morten.
I reached out to you because I think that since COVID, I think we have been in constant challenges, not just in our industry, but in all industries,
Mhm.
and some of them are something we can't do anything about, and something we can do something about. And I'm in this particular case interested because I think a lot of American printing companies are in a situation because of the maybe tariffs, maybe not tariffs that the U.S. administration is putting on both China, Japan, and Europe. Obviously, will somehow influence the industry in my view, very negatively because it will be difficult to justify investments, and it will be difficult for the vendors to just absorb the prices. So I guess that you, as both a printer yourself, but also a leader in the industry in America, this is something that I guess that you have had discussions with your peers on. Maybe you can give us a little insight from your word.
Yes. So lots of discussions, lots of musings, lots of wondering about what's going to actually happen, where things are actually going to land when all the dust settles.
Mhm.
We've had it's been a back and forth in terms of what those tariffs would actually wind up being. And it's particularly with China, with Canada, with Mexico, they've gone up and down in terms of where they are. Setting aside whether or not trade imbalances or trade is fair or not. These have been, of course, very disruptive
Mm.
in how the manner in which they've been rolled out.
Yeah.
And they're particularly challenging because there isn't there isn't I guess, a calculus that people can look at and say, we know it's going to land here. So, this is why the stock market is going, haywire. It's the volatility there has been acute. Every time there's an announcement, it goes up or it goes down, and these are pretty massive swings. So it's been very challenging for everybody to make plans beyond the next few days, let alone the next few months or the next few years.
Yeah.
So lots of discussions. There is a lot of concern in just about every industry that we participate in. We work, of course, closely with the National Association of Manufacturers and like-minded organizations to try to figure out what should the messaging be, what should we ask for, what should we press for. And so we're trying to, I guess, create a groundswell of understanding, but that understanding is ephemeral. I mean, it changes on a weekly basis. So it's been difficult to
Mm.
really come up with the proper messaging. So
Mm.
so
Um,
yeah.
I have a question because I think that if we look at the tariffs as such, I think maybe also for our viewers, maybe in particular in America, to understand this, because there is, like, let's say, two chapters or two sides to this one. There is the printing equipment, the investments in technology that obviously is needed to produce and be always as
Mhm.
efficient as possible and as profitable as possible. But then there are the services printed itself. Um, is there even is there tariffs? Let's say that if you buy anything from Canada or if you sell anything to Mexico, the actual products, is that also is tariffs also part of the services that printing companies buy and sell, or is it mainly on, let's say, capex investments so far?
So it's going to be certainly capex investments. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see people holding tight, particularly if they're sourcing from Europe or from China or from Canada or Mexico. They're going to hold tight, and that's not just capex investments. A lot of our paper comes from Europe and comes from Canada and comes from
Yeah,
China.
yeah.
So it's also it's all of the inputs that a manufacturer needs here are
Mm.
I was reading the other day that, the Ford F-150, one of our most popular trucks, only a third of the parts of that truck, even though it's American made, are actually produced in this country. So, so you're going to have all of so from a capex perspective, certainly things are going to be more expensive. No one wants to buy if they're if they're going to be 50% tariffs on this, that, or the other thing. So there's that. The other inputs, of course, are things like aluminum plates, and and now we're at 50% on aluminum and 50% on steel as of a couple of days ago, I believe. So that's gonna so the inputs are also going to be affected, and as a result, the prices will go up. So about 62%, I think, in our last survey said they're going to have to raise prices. So when you raise prices, you're going to be selling less. So profitability, sales won't expand, profitability will be decreased. So it's not just capex; it's actually doing business itself. Wherever they sell the output, it doesn't matter, because the inputs are going to be affected in that regard.
One of the reasons why the administration is suggesting these kind of things is obviously to attract manufacturing back to the U.S., right? But I was thinking that, for example, we talk about aluminum and plates. I think that Kodak is manufacturing its plates in the U.S., right?
They are. Kodak is the only manufacturer of aluminum plates left in the U.S. Fujifilm pulled out a few years back. Yeah, and there are actually pretty high tariffs on Fujifilm plates. So I think it's 83% right now. So I mean, but that was actually a separate action that took place last October. So, and there are actually reasons for that. In terms of what was happening there, and on China, I think it's over 150% on aluminum plates. So.
And what about, because I mean, one of the things that at least I think is, let's say, commonly understood when we talk economies is that even though that Kodak, for example, could source aluminum in the US and could produce at the same cost as they could before, when the competitive situation changes, there is, let's say, incentive to increase the prices, because why sell too cheap if you don't have any competition? Is that what you also start seeing already now, or?
Well, Kodak will say that that's not what they're doing, of course, and I don't have any reason to believe that they're actually now raising their prices because they have some latitude to do that. I don't think that's what's happening. I think what they wanted was a level playing field. I think they did find out, they discovered in the congressional hearings on this last fall, that Japan was actually selling cheaper in Japan than they were selling. So in other words, I think there are legitimate issues that Kodak had to pursue that line. So does it give them the latitude to charge more? It does. Do they? That I can't tell you.
No.
So I just know that that in very specific incidents, there are legitimate reasons to put tariffs in place. Whether it's dumping or whether it's subsidization, by governments. The problem we have now is that's not how we're dealing with this. We're putting in massive tariffs across the board on everything, and then we're saying, okay, come make a deal with us. So, and those deals, there are 190 countries that need to make deals with us, and it's just it takes some time. I mean, so the only one I'm fully aware of is the one that we just did with the UK, that the US did with the UK, and there was a deal in place, for them to take.
As far as I read, it's actually not a signed deal. It was more like a framework for a deal. So I mean, you can always argue these kind of things.
Yeah.
Another question, Ford. When we talk about domestic production, and you mentioned both China and Canada as supplier of paper, is the American paper industry at all capable of subsidizing and replacing what is imported today? Or will that also be a challenge, whatever way we look at it?
It's going to be a challenge whatever way you look at it, because over the last 10 years or so, about a third of paper output in this country has been eliminated. They've moved from fine papers and printing papers to brown, right? So they're going to do craft because there's more margins. It's cheaper to produce. And so that's what's happened here. Either mills have been shuttered, or they've converted all the fine paper mills over to something that is, they've got the market and the margins to make that worthwhile. To convert them back to fine paper is going to be expensive. To open up mills for that is going to be expensive. And the problem is they don't know how long these tariffs are going to last. So
because that is again the uncertainty that seems.
So I mean, if they're looking at a 5 to 10 year payback on putting a couple $100 million into building a new plant or retrofitting a plant, then why would they do that unless they're absolutely sure these tariffs are going to be around 5 years from now? It doesn't make any sense. So and that's part of the problem of the manner in which this has been laid out. It's not being done congressionally; it's being done by the executive. So
Yes, precisely. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I was actually one of the few. I think maybe you were the same, but when under the under the Trump one administration,
Mm.
where he was very much against the subsidization of paper in Canada,
Mm.
and I think he also put tariffs on, or some kind of at least some limitations in the import of paper. I was actually in favor of that because, as you say yourself, if you are subsidizing an entire industry, it creates an unfair competition, and basically that closes down the domestic production, not because of market situation, but because of political influence, right?
Yeah, well, I think at that point, if I remember it correctly, and it's going back a ways, but I believe there was a lot of lumber issues, a lot of wood pulp issues, which of course
Yeah.
are precursor to paper, that sort of thing, and that was kind of where the focus was to a certain extent. And again, there can be legitimate reasons for those things. So,
Mhm.
but I think the problem that we have now is that you know. One of the things that's being cited for Canada and Mexico has nothing to do with trade imbalances per
Mm.
se. It has to do
Mm.
with we don't want more fentanyl coming across our border, and we want you to clamp down on illegal immigration, that sort of thing.
Mm.
So, uh, and so you're applying a remedy which is financial and trade oriented on things that have nothing to do with finance and trade, and so
Mm.
that makes it difficult to advocate for or
Mm.
against,
Mm.
because you're kind of mixing metaphors.
Yeah, yeah.
You
But I
understand?
guess that is also, I think that maybe from a European perspective, sometimes the rhetoric can be difficult to understand because when you have a trade deficit, as for example, the biggest country in the world and the richest economy on planet,
Yeah,
I think that a lot of economists would say that's only natural that there is a trade deficit. But
yeah.
of course, on the
We have,
other hand,
we have more to
it need,
spend than other
yeah,
countries. So
precisely, there needs to be,
Canada, there are 40 million people or 60 million people aren't going to spend what 335 million people spend. Just not going to
precisely,
happen. Yeah.
yeah.
So there will, and yeah, so there will always be trade deficits because we have more disposable income, and we consume a lot. We consume a tremendous amount in this country, as you probably are aware. You've been here many times.
I've seen it
So
a couple of times.
yeah, yeah. So
Especially when it comes to the size of food to food, I would
yeah,
say.
so and I mean, look, I mean, certainly the National Association of Manufacturers would love to see the playing field leveled so that manufacturing gets a boost in this country. But it's kind of difficult for some to kind of understand. During the first Trump term back in 2018, I think he put tariffs on steel at that time, and it did create 6,000 new steel jobs,
Mm.
but we lost 75,000 manufacturing jobs because it doesn't take as many people to make steel
Yeah.
as the people who use it. So you lose 75,000 manufacturing jobs, but you created 6,000 steel jobs. Now there will be some who say steel is important for our own national security, and that's more important than what they do with the steel. You know, I guess you could
I
argue
mean,
that point, but
I
it is
understand.
a challenge. Yeah,
Yeah, I understand that of course the um, let's say the political objectives, and I understand that also part of the security side of what the security guarantees guaranteed by the U.S. government to other countries depends on at least some level of fairness in both trades and deficits and how you work. It doesn't work so well if you have high limitations and free competition from a business partner, and then you have to give them free access to your market. So I guess that
yeah,
that those kind of things, of course, make sense.
yeah.
But from a, let's say, an industry perspective, I think that, and that was also what I wrote to you in
Mm.
my in the
Those-
introduction to this interview, was like, you cannot, our industry, in my opinion, is probably too small to imagine Heidelberg having their own production in the US or any of the other of
yeah,
these printing presses. And I think that when you look at the packaging market, which is like really, really important part of the American printing industry, if you look at commercial printers that are, using, offset presses and also digital presses from abroad, this seems to, I mean, at least from my side, it seems to be, I mean, it can be part of a bigger political scope that I get. But I also think it's a little bit unfair because we are an industry we cannot do anything about. We cannot change the narrative. We cannot change the dynamics of how we do things. And that was why I was asking you, do you think that
Mhm.
Printing United with your lobbying
Mhm.
be able to influence? And you gave me a great answer, but maybe you can just tell me again.
Yeah, so it's a particularly challenging time, and here's one of the reasons. We just had a legislative fly-in, and we brought about 40 printers in last month to DC, and we had
I
about
saw there was on the steps in front of Capitol.
yeah.
I saw a lot of printers, right?
So we met
Yeah.
with about 60 different congressional offices, senators, and congressmen and women, and their staffs, and we raised a number of issues. Postal reform was one of them, and tariffs was one of them, and we have a lot of things that are kind of on our docket to do. So we did raise the issues with those. The challenge that we have now, of course, is this isn't being done by Congress, and that's our lobbying essentially is targeted at Congress because that's where the laws come from. So this is being done by essentially one person, President Trump, and the executive branch. He's making the decisions on what to do and what not to do. Setting aside whether that's constitutional or not. And there have been lawsuits filed in the last 60 days to try to stem this because it really is, it's a form of taxation, and the power of the purse is relegated to Congress, in our Constitution, not the executive. However, setting all that aside, the courts will determine how much authority the president has. The other thing is, we don't have a lot of access to President Trump. He's not going to return my phone calls, as you mentioned. So now he might return the phone call of Jay Timmons at the National Association of Manufacturers, but at the end of the day, it makes it much more difficult to do. Is to kind of penetrate that particular branch of the government, which we're not set up to do, as it were. So. Now we are trying to get the word out that we're as an industry, we're one of the biggest unseen industries in this country. If you add up everything that we do, it's between packaging and label and folding carton and printing and apparel, it's over $300 billion, and we're probably in the top 5 industries. It's just no one thinks of us as being that big, and which is why we have the alliance now. Is we
Yeah.
need to get across the fact that we touch everything. No,
And
very
that was also, I
yeah.
remember that was like one of the reasons why Printing United Alliance of also invested in the new um, what is it called? These codes for trade, that Swang and Uncle
Universal printing taxonomy. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
taxonomy for
The idea
yeah.
is if we all speak the same language, then we can get the government to speak that language, and that we can track, who is actually a printer or not. And it's never going to be perfect because of the way the Bureau of Labor Statistics operates. So, for example, implants. There are thousands of implants in this country, and they're a part of another company. Well, a company gets to choose one code. And so Walmart has a
Mm.
huge implant that does hundreds of millions of dollars in printing, but they're
Yeah,
not going to say Walmart's not a printer. So
yeah,
that hundreds of $1 million we don't get credit for, and won't.
yeah.
University of Arizona, all the universities have implants. We're not going to get credit for that.
Mm.
But we can extrapolate. That's really,
Yeah.
we want to get closer than we are, and then extrapolate, and then say this is how many people actually work in this industry. It's not
Mm.
450,000. It's probably 750,000 or
Yeah,
950,000.
yeah,
So when you have closer to a million with 300 billion plus in receipts, revenue, it is a sizable industry, and that's part of the process of what we're doing at the Alliance is trying to drive home that message. No
mm.
product or service. I mean, it's great sitting with a congressman or a senator in their office and pointing out all the knickknacks and all the T-shirts and all of the books and everything they've got, all the magazines, all of that stuff is printed. And just say printing, 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 and it starts to open their eyes because
Mm.
people have an old-fashioned view of what printing really
Mm.
is. So they think
Is
it's kind of low-tech, ink under your nails, but it's not. It's a very high-tech
yeah,
industry now, and it's a very sophisticated industry now. So.
yeah. Is an organization, and maybe it's a stupid question, but I ask it anyway because I was just thinking that in Europe where we have Intergraph and we have we have the labor unions on one side and you have the federations on the other side.
Mhm.
The labor side is often associated with the social democrats and to the left in the parliament. Is an organization like Printing United Alliance, is that also politically driven, or is it a non-political organization?
We are apolitical. So
Apolitical.
yeah, so we are apolitical, and we don't care if they're Democrats or
Yeah.
Republicans. We don't care what their social views are.
Yeah.
Um, we are small business oriented. 78% of the printers in this country, are small businesses defined
Mm.
as such, and so it's small business oriented. Now,
Mm.
in some cases, people will assume that the vast majority of them are Republican, and they probably are, which would be more right leaning.
Yeah.
But what's happened really over the last 20 or 30 years is the Democrats, who used to have a lock on blue collar, working
Yeah.
class people, no longer
Yeah.
have that.
Yeah.
So
That,
so
that actually
so
kind
that,
of
that
changed.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very split demographic now.
Yeah.
So it would not do us any good to come out one
No,
way or
no.
the other politically.
No, no, but the reason I was asking was, I understand why you assume that maybe that was leading the way. I was more
Yeah.
thinking of that I think that being apolitical in
Mhm.
this time of
Mhm.
history also makes it more important for all the non-members of printing companies to join the alliance, because this, in my opinion, should be like, here together you can stand much stronger. And as it is an apolitical organization, you cannot say, I'm not here because I'm
Yeah.
Democrat, I'm not here because I'm Republican.
Correct.
I'm here to support my own business, basically, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, I mean, one of the precepts that we have, one of our fundamental tenets is together we're stronger. The more
Mm.
voices we aggregate, I tell my staff, National Association of Manufacturers, 14,000 members. We just passed 5,000. When I get up to 14,000, 15,000, maybe a president will take my call. And it does have an influence when we talk to a congressman. If we
Mm.
can say, we have 30 members in your district versus 300 members in your district, and they
Yeah.
employ not 300 people, but 3 or 4,000 people, and they
Yeah.
produce not 100 million but 500 million dollars worth of revenue in your district. We have their full attention. So aggregating these voices is very important. So, and how we use that is we don't talk about larger political positions. What we do is we look at very specific things. We look at postal reform. Where do we stand on that? We look
Yeah.
at tariffs. Where do we stand on that? So we are very issue driven. What is it that will make the best economic climate
Mm.
for printers in this country? So
Mm.
so it's, and whether a Republican or a Democrat supports it is irrelevant to us.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
argue the issue and stick within that very framework.
When you as an organization look at, I mean, as you have explained here, the situation has impact on our industry, and in particular in the US, and of course that will consequently also impact the manufacturing side in the rest of the world, because it's a huge and important market, obviously. Do you have any answers to members? I mean, because I mean, it seems to me that it was under COVID, you had a fantastic COVID
Mhm.
response program to
Mhm.
people, right? But here it seems that it's a little bit out of control, right, or out of hands, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. So, do we have any answers? We do. They're not great answers, but just because no one has any answers at this point.
Mm.
I mean, you can't go to anybody and say, and they're going to tell you how this is all going to shake out, or what to do about how this is being rolled out. We do a lot of research, and that research is about what are the effects of tariff going to be? How do you see this affecting your business? So we've just released a quarterly report on that, so they can go to printing.org and download the executive summary. If they're members, they can get the full report.
Mm.
And we also do we do things like, how are you going to be dealing with it? So in these reports are things about how are you going to be dealing with inventory issues, supply
Mm.
chain issues as a result of the tariff increases. How many of you are going to pass on cost? How many will you absorb it? If you absorb it, how are you going to be dealing with that absorption? Is it going to be through increased productivity? Those types of things. So we try to give people at least a playbook about what people are figuring out. So we get that information from printers, and then we disseminate that
Mm.
that information back out. So
Mm.
so that's essentially right now what our function is in terms of resolving all of it.
Yeah, of course.
That's a whole
Yeah,
different ball of
yeah.
wax there. But yeah, so that's essentially what we focus on in terms as an association to help printers is here's what people are doing. Here's how they think it's going to affect them. Here's what their sentiments are moving forward. And it gives everybody maybe a little peace of mind saying, well, I was thinking about the same thing, or I didn't think about that, but I'm going to try that. So yeah, so definitely there's some good information. Andy
Mm,
Paparosi and Nathan Safran, and they do some great work
mm.
with
I'm
the
sure about that. Yeah.
community. Yeah.
I was just thinking. I know this also may sound crazy, but I have been obviously also been thinking. Not that I have any solutions. Don't worry. But I was just thinking that
Well, if you
because
got one, please, I'm all ears. So
I was thinking that if you look at the technology, and you know yourself that often when you buy technology you depreciate it over a certain period of years, and today if you look at equipment, often it has a way longer life than you both plan your repayment time and your depreciation time. When it comes to, like, let's say, the financial ways of also balancing your books may
mm-hmm,
be different in a time of change. Is that
mm-hmm,
something that you also consider? Because the reason I'm asking is because, I mean, we make a lot of films, and I was with an Italian printing company just a few months ago,
mm-hmm.
where they had a 29 years old printing press that still works fine, right?
Yeah,
And
right,
I'm not suggesting that it should be 29 years of depreciation or anything like that. And
right.
of course, it needs also to be aligned with residual values and all those kind of things. But unless tariffs will be on a high level forever,
Mm-hmm,
which I don't think it will, there might be tariffs on a lower level. Also, when you read both the Trump 27,
mm-hmm,
47, and when you read the Project 2025, you can
mm-hmm.
basically see that this is also a negotiation tactics to
Yeah.
basically have, let's say, a base level where you divide people in, or countries into whether they are allies or vassals,
Mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm.
trading partners or direct enemies. So of course this is a period of time, but I was just thinking that maybe those kind of things could ease a little bit of the pain right now, even though that you have to pay more for the machines, right?
Yes. So we also, one of the things that we are keenly interested in are the tax package, which is part of the big beautiful bill. As you know, what is
Okay,
going to be?
so
Yeah,
that supports some
yeah.
printing
So
companies because
for
that's what
example,
is.
our argument in manufacturing is accelerated depreciation. Somebody should
Yeah,
be able to accelerate the entire cost of their machine rather than doing it what it used to be over 5, or 10 years, depending on what type of equipment it was or a
yeah,
build. That's it. So with accelerated depreciation, we believe that will help people to pay in the
yeah,
moment rather than trying to budget out in the next 5 years, do that depreciation on the P&L, which, because they're having to put the cash out now and
yeah.
pay,
Yeah.
so accelerated depreciation we think
But
should
that makes a lot of sense, and it's also what I mean when you saw after COVID. I think that
yeah.
especially Southern European governments were very
Mm-hmm.
progressive in suggesting a faster depreciation, even supporting
Yeah.
cash in return for faster depreciations. So obviously, but so you are also thinking about different kind
We
of tax
definitely
schemes.
we've been lobbying for to maintain accelerated because it was in the 2017 tax law, so we've been
Okay,
arguing to maintain that. Now it is sunsetting now, so now it's I think it's 80 or 90%. So it's sunset and it would die at the end of this year if it's not
mm,
renewed. So that's one of the things that we're arguing for, among
mm,
many other tax provisions. But yes,
mm,
but that's one of the things that we think we'd like to see them keep. Now, again, it's not without costs, and
no,
it has to be paid for somehow. And who,
100%.
yeah, so who's going to pay the bill? I guess is really the issue. So
Last question. I know you're a busy man. We soon have a Printing United coming up, and I know that is your fellow colleagues that are mainly taking care of that. But is something like tariffs, is that influencing at all a trade show, or is it very much more like money spent within the U.S.?
Yeah, so well, it's not money spent within the U.S. And as you mentioned, you got Heidelberg, you got a number, all even if they have a U.S. presence, a lot of the stuff is
They're looking
manufactured
for
overseas.
money.
I mean, a lot of the inks are manufactured now overseas. A lot of that has been offshored. So there's going to be. So I have concerns. I will say that we're on track to be as big, if not bigger, than next year in terms of the amount of square feet and the number of exhibitors that we have. We haven't seen a diminution in that yet. We do see a lot less companies from China because they don't know what to do. So so we'll probably have less from China. Um, you know, what I hope is that to the extent that it can, the dust will have settled by October, and this bill will pass, and that some deals will be made, and that we'll kind of settle into, okay, at least we know what it's going to be. Because I think the uncertainty, we're going to have the exhibitors there, they're going to be there, we're going to get the audience there, that's fine, but people still have to buy. It has to be a good show. And so I do have concerns about that, as any normal person would. Is it going to be a buying market at that time? So it just remains to be seen. I'm hopeful that there'll be enough of a settling of all of this dust for people to be confident. If nothing else, there'll be good conversations about what to buy once something does settle down. So still have that. I do think the sale. I feel for a lot of our manufacturing folks, because I think the sales cycles they're stretching out now, because people are like, I'm not really sure, where's this coming from, that sort of thing. So I can imagine they're probably on tenterhooks at this point. So.
Ford, we are big fan of Printing United, and we appreciate the collaboration we have with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
I can't help think about that since Dallas, the very first show, it seems that there's it's a little bit uphill with too many crises, right? I mean, are you looking forward to get out of crisis mode and just have normal shows?
I remember what my predecessor told me when I took the reins. He said, "It's easy. You're going to coast for 5 years. You don't have to worry about it." So, and of course, in the last 9 years, we've had 2 shows canceled. Those were huge issues, obviously, for us. We have all of the stuff that's going on this year. It feels like there's a crisis. This one, particularly because it's kind of self-inflicted to a large extent. This feels very unusual. But I think that we have such a vital and creative industry. I'm not concerned about the industry.
No.
I really don't. Everyone adapts. We've had postal increases here that have created another type of crisis, among a lot of printers. So there's just, yes, it has been one thing after another that we've kind of been, battling. But I do think that, printers are, they're creative, they're gutsy, with the manufacturers doing all that they're doing to help productivity. We've also made great leaps and bounds in terms of the quality, the speed. AI is going to be changing things right and left. The software that's coming out, a lot of integrations between manufacturers. There's a lot going on that really bodes well. It's just, that stuff doesn't get the headlines. What gets the headlines are the things that could be, a big problem. Because that's how our news works. So, the good news stories don't get the same press. So.
Funny enough, I live off that, so I do get what you talk about here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you for. I look forward to see you in Orlando in just a few months' time, and it would be fantastic if the dust has fallen down, and just so at least we know where we are at and what to expect in the future. I think that will probably be the single biggest wish you can have right now. And I think a lot of manufacturers think that 0 tariffs is too much to ask for, but I mean, at least that could be another wish as well, right?
Yeah. We can always hope, I believe. Yeah. But there'll be some, and people will figure it out. So, so hopefully they won't be showstoppers, as it were.
Well, thank you for your time here, and see you soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Morten.
Bye-bye.